Hello, everyone. Welcome to Retail Corner. I'm your host, Shelja, and today I have with me an absolutely prolific guest, Mr. John Nordmark, a long-time retail industry specialist and absolutely impressive resume if you just go and see him on LinkedIn. For all of you, if you look up John Nordmark, you will see the first thing that comes up is eBags, and he sold for $100 million to Samsonite, and now he's the CEO of Iterate.ai. And welcome to my show, John.
Thank you, Shelja. I appreciate getting invited.
I am absolutely amazed by how you have been a serial entrepreneur. So the first question I have for you is that yes, eBags sold for $100 million, but for me, the most exciting part was that you were working for Samsonite, you worked there for a few years, left, started your business, and then X years later, you go back to them and tell them that we need to learn how did you maintain relationships, because employees leaving is always a little bit of a tiff. So good relationship management. What do you have to say about that? How would new retailers how to go
Well,
about that?
even in this digital age, and we both love digital. It's so much depends on personal relationships, and I think that will. I mean, I can't imagine that ever changing. Digital just improves relationships. With Samsonite, they were I worked there 10 years and had a lot of good friends there over the years. And then when eBags started, Samsonite became a supplier, and then it became it was a business relationship. But I think that they're a large company in the super traditional sense, in that they were always a little bit careful about moving into new products and new technologies, and so it was just natural for them after eBags grew, I guess, to invite it back into the family. But it was a surprise to me.
Okay, great, fantastic. I mean, that's a really amazing story. So
Yeah.
from then to Iterate, what was the big motivation that led you to leave the retail per se, from actually being the person doing the retail to get to a more macro role and opening up a company like Iterate, and then looking at evaluating startups? What was the motivation behind that?
Well, back at eBags, it was a pureplay.com. And we always were dependent on using the very best tools out there, building the very best tools. Whether the ratings and review software that we used was our own, we built it, and there were only 5 retailers in the world when we built that software that had that kind of product, and we knew, because we tested everything, that we could improve conversion rates if we, put certain technologies into the site. But eBags actually became a kind of a test lab for many technology startups and many technologies that we built on our own. And so even though eBags was a retailer, it was a digital retailer, and it was very specialized with the technologies we used. I think in 2007, 2008, we were considered one of the top 10 converting websites on the whole web. And that came after doing many experiments through an A/B split testing software, which we also built 7 years before the term even showed up in Wikipedia, to figure out what worked and didn't work. So I think, from the eBags days, I've been kind of a technologist, or a technology enthusiast from start. eBags wouldn't have made it had we not been, very experimental around technologies.
Okay.
All kind, like the early versions of recommendation technologies.
Okay.
The early versions of A/B split test software, the ratings and review software. We built tons of dropship software.
Okay.
Yeah.
So from then on to seeing today, where everybody's chasing the 5G dream, the first, from a hardware perspective, looking at the
Mhm.
infrastructure perspective. So when you look at the retail industry and what Iterate is trying to do, and looking at the startups and trying to evaluate the most efficient system, when you look at 5G, and there's a lot of hype around it, how do you think one of the most important pieces of 5G is going to impact the retail industry?
Well, 5G, I think, is the catalyst to a lot of other technologies working. And for instance, AI, can be accessed a lot easier once the 5G is working. Augmented reality capabilities, maybe that could flow into eyeglasses or flow into earbuds or something like that, will be facilitated through 5G, because 5G will be able to move. It's like 1,000 times more data, 10 times faster than what we're getting in 4G. And so all this stuff that is available on the web will be able to flow into places like retail environments in real time. And it'll make technologies a lot more actionable too. So, we see a lot of retailers trying to move more into frictionless capabilities. Like with a huge convenience store that's global, we've built a product that's called Pay at the Pump. So you drive into the gas station, it recognizes your car through an AI, which operates in the cameras in the gas stations, and then basically, begins to interact with your phone. So your phone becomes the payment mechanism, and activates the pump so that you can pump the gas out. And those types of capabilities we're going to see more and more and more as 5G comes live. So 5G is going to kind of be the connecting tissue between AI, blockchain, augmented reality, virtual reality, all these technologies that will then be able to integrate together, and come into new interfaces too, like eyeglasses, which we know all the big companies like Google, Facebook, Apple, and Amazon are all working on right now for 2023 launches.
So according to you, the whole convergence, like in the last 50 years, that there are these videos that are floating around where you see that, okay, earlier you had a calculator and you had a notepad, and all of that has converged into this tiny little cell phone. Now the
Right.
next step towards this is either contactless, or you have the glasses, contact lenses. Is it dystopia that we are thinking 10 years from now a billion devices will be there, which will all be glasses everybody will be wearing, or it will still be a hybrid model for the next 5 years at least? Where do you stand on this industry?
I think it'll be hybrid, but I think what we're going to see is a lot of experiments around what kind of interfaces are going to be enabled through, the 5G and improved augmented reality, the improved ability to create digital selves, or those kind of things. The improvement of voice technologies, and how that can operate through different types of devices, even the usage of like bone conduction and technologies that kind of interface with your thinking. We're going to see. We know Apple, Facebook, Google, Amazon. They're all working. They're working on glasses that are going to start emerging in 2023. Who knows what will be in those? But I'm sure there'll be many experiments about, let's say in the world of retailer, you could be walking down an aisle of a Kroger or King Soopers type grocery store, and be able to activate ratings and reviews coming from Amazon and see them in your glasses. Or maybe it'll speak to you through your bones, like no one else will hear it, but just through bone conduction coming through your earpiece. And but we know all these companies are spending tons of money, in the billions of dollars, on R&D around these things. And so there'll be a lot of different interfaces that emerge.
So you also, I remember I read an article where you talked about very heavily about the Amazon ecosystem, not just Amazon being a company, and the speaker Echo has entered your kid's room and you are freaking out. Now,
Yeah.
on one hand, you are a proponent of new technologies, and all of us need to adapt. All the retail companies need to adapt. But on the other hand, as a personal user, you have all these privacy fears like everyone else. So how do you create a balance between what we need to push to the consumers as entrepreneurs versus where do we draw the line, given that trillions of dollars the companies are doing is pretty much to control people's mind as the conspiracy theory goes. So where do you draw the line? How do you create that balance?
Oh boy. I don't know that I'm the person that can draw that line. I think we're just going to see many different attempts to reach into people's homes and people trying to put products on people's bodies, that are products that consume data out of these, out of people, that watch what we do, and create these new digital me's that will start emerging. And then there'll be some that people accept and some that people reject, just as has always been the case. And so I think the line, I've learned one thing. I'm never really, no one's really great at predicting the future. I'm right half the time, maybe. So I don't know, but what I do know is there'll just be many attempts, and the ones that make people's lives easier and they're helpful, I think they will continue. They'll become the products of the future.
Okay. Well said. So when we look at the next 5 years and we see these crazy numbers like $100 billion AR/VR market, it's going to become $1 trillion. We see all these big numbers, but at the end of the day, it's all about community interacting with each other and then buying certain things. So retail has, trading retail has been there for thousands of years, and it has just taken different forms. So the 10 years, when you see the retail industry, on one hand, we have these hyper innovations in the Silicon Valley and the best, moneyed countries in the world. And then you have the outskirts of India and Africa, where you also have millions and millions of people who don't even have food and water. We keep talking about this.
Yeah.
But on one hand, we are trying to reach Mars, and on the other hand, we're still struggling to feed people food and water.
Right.
When you look at all these blockchain, AI technologies, while on a macro level, it feels like, okay, it's going to do more good than bad. But in practical solution, it doesn't really happen. Where do you see these big companies transforming and becoming almost like governments controlling lives of people pretty much openly and not under the garb of all these laws? Like, do you see that happening in the next 20 years?
Well, companies like Amazon, I don't know if hopefully this will answer your question, but like Amazon, you talked about the ecosystem. They have so many businesses. I think it's about 43, 44 subsidiaries right now. It's hard to keep up. Like, they're constantly adding. And, they have everything from Zoox, which is an autonomous vehicle company that they purchased, to, the PillPack for, monitoring your drugs or your prescriptions that you have to take, to Prime, where they're watching what you're watching on video, on the Netflix type activities, and to the Echoes. I've got a number of them in my house, and the Ring doorbell, and you name it, and then let alone the purchase activities that are happening there, the Whole Foods activities where you're grocery shopping. So companies like Amazon will know more about us than any government, I believe, like way more. And because of that, and because they're very big into the AI, we know they've got some 10,000 AI employees a couple of years ago, working on that. They're going to be able to kind of understand us as people, these large organizations, more than almost any government, I suspect. And so, they'll come into our lives kind of quietly. I think it'll be quiet influence over us. I don't think the government goes away, but if you juxtapose that with like China has huge movements underway in AI, in blockchain. These new technologies are very, very important to the government there. That's why we're seeing these clashes, partly between the big companies there, like the Alibabas and the government, and they're actually positioning themselves with the blockchain to require, as part of the the Chinese laws, basically, for these companies that build these blockchain platforms to provide all the identity information to the government. And I don't think, that's happening in China. That's reality today. It's at Baidu, Alibaba company, Tencent. But here it's the opposite. The companies are trying to, they're collecting all the data. They're not, the government can't get easy access to it. So the government really, these companies are going to have lots of power over us. And I don't know, all we can do is hope that they use it for the good, and that they use it to help the average person, or maybe even the underserved people like you were just talking about. And, and hopefully the consumers vote with their wallets, and promote those companies that do good for us.
Thanks. So you're absolutely right. At the end of the day, it's the individual conscience that always takes over where, we all go. I wanted to bring up the topic of digital me tech. We are moving towards where all of us have social media accounts, but now from having just our social media accounts, we are all turning ourselves into avatars. And then AI is going to get into it. So if all of us are physically also going to represent online, that means there is a whole virtual retail world that is coming up with the convergence of AR, VR. You look at the metaverse. Recently, I think a designer bag got sold for more money in a game than in reality.
Right.
So are you seeing a completely two parallel retail economy, but connected through some sort of a super highway, so that the economic balances between the virtual and real world is actually used in the real world? How and where do you see this revolution going in the next 10 years?
Yeah, Roblox, Tim Sweeney from Epic Games, Facebook, they're all trying to create the metaverse now, right? They're all talking about it. And we're working with large organizations, retail, wholesale companies that are interested in NFTs and where the metaverse is going, and how that's going to shape out in the future. Because you're right, like in the NFT markets today, there are sales of bags. The virtual bag is selling for more than the physical bag. You've got a lot of artwork selling this way. With the, it started with crypto kitties, I think, and now it's, and now people are trying to look at how can I attach NFT type products to physical products, and how can I enhance the physical product, or how can I attach a ticket to an event to a physical product, and then how can I maybe create a chain of a historical record of who has owned a certain product over time, so that it has a little bit of a story that comes with it. And so I think the whole digital me concept is super interesting, because, to me, the digital me it goes way beyond online. It's tracking everything we do online, but it's also tracking, this is a Whoop. It's tracking everything about the way I sleep, my heart rate, my recovery rates, we're working with a company right now that can see what you take in and out of cabinets in like grocery stores, and and maybe if it knows that it's me opening that cabinet in a store, all these things will come together. If you have a Tesla, we know where you've driven. If you have a phone in your pocket, it'll know where you've driven. And so all of this data that's collected, which again, the 5G networks will enable more and more and more, as all of this comes together into the digital me, it creates this profile that is unprecedented. At the same time, products can have their digital me's too, because of the NFTs and the blockchain. Those records are going to get stored on the products. And so, for a retailer, the job has to be to understand those products and the digital me's and marry up all that data, so you can understand the journeys of both of these things together.
So you were talking about digital me. So to continue that conversation, digital me is giving rise to a whole new class of entrepreneurs. I feel I fall in that category, visual entrepreneurs. We can't code to save our lives. So companies after companies and the top 5, 10 big companies are constantly talking about low code, no code tools. So for
Right.
novices out there, like you are specializing in, creating a whole ecosystem of low code, no code tools. So to our listeners and audiences, if you could give a little bit of what Iterate does in terms of helping startups, what level of startups you're looking at, what kind of companies, and how does this help the retail industry? If you could just give us a little bit of an insight.
Yeah, in the past 40 years, I don't know, it's like 50 million apps, 50 million apps have been built. In the next 5 years, another 450 million actually 500 million will be built. So way more apps, but 450 million of those will be built with low code, no code tools. And that's a prediction from Microsoft. It's another prediction from a big research firm. But the reason this is good for people like you and me is these tools, a lot of time, they come with pre-built modules. In other words, so I can talk about our platform. Iterate has a platform we call Interplay, and it has 465 pre-built code nodes or little compartments that contain connectors into Oracle, connectors into SAP, connectors into Salesforce, on the big enterprise side. And they pull data into, if you're building a prototype, they'll bring real world data, from a real company into the prototype itself. We also have a lot of pre-built connections into startups. So if you're starting a company, you could take your software and wrap it in one of these nodes, and all of a sudden it becomes available to anybody who uses this low-code platform. And so we've pre-wrapped a bunch of those technologies. And then we have, I think it's 34 pre-wrapped AI modules. And the thing is, to be an AI engineer, I think there are about 200,000 or 300,000 formally trained real AI engineers in the world versus 35 million software developers. They're not the same. Like a lot of people think a software developer could write AI, but it's not true in the true sense of AI. It's a very complex, skill set that you need to do that. But these low code tools take the AI that's been built by these people that are formally trained and make those available in pre-wrapped nodes so that a normal software developer, can take advantage of that. And so one advantage is speed. Like that's one thing that you can get out of these low code tools. And because you're just dragging and dropping technologies together and you don't need to build anything really from scratch. Right. And we're seeing that the companies can build products anywhere from 10 to 17 times faster than the old traditional way. Yeah. So speed is big. And with that comes a huge cost savings, right? And because if you can go 10 to 15 times faster, you get done a lot faster, and it just doesn't, require as many man hours to get something done. And then a third real big advantage to these low code tools is when you can get stuff done 10 to 15, 17 times faster, you can get them into a test environment a lot faster. So you can learn 10 times as much. In other words, if you can develop 10 times as many experiments, or 15 times or 17 times as many experiments because you're able to move that much faster with the same number of people, you can learn a lot faster. And, through trial and error, which is an important part of the digital world, learn by experimentation. And so in my mind, the advantages to using these low code tools are, every company should be using them. Every company, from startups to enterprise.
So the mindset itself is changing very rapidly, where earlier companies would say, okay, I want programmers or I want a company to customize everything for me. So now
Yeah.
the companies are customizing based on low code tools, not actually going down to coding from scratch. So that is one of the biggest revolution that we see today happening. And that is why there is this whole horde of startups coming in, trying to ride on the wave of low code, no code tools to try and come up with solutions.
Right.
Great. So now one of the things that I noticed over the last 2 years specifically is that the low code, no code tools has given rise to a lot of these visual softwares.
Yeah.
A lot of these visual softwares where people like me, artists, they are coming together, creating these virtual characters and then creating brands out of themselves. So retail industry is dependent on brand ambassadors, and they kind of, cost about 10 to 15% of advertising cost to these retail companies. Now the retail companies are going ahead and creating their own AI avatars to represent them in the market. How do you see that kind of thing impacting the digital economy, the digital retail, and the physical retail? Because the virtual influencers are also going to be hired to sell real world products.
So your question,
So my question is that when you see virtual influencers competing with human influencers in trying to take a piece of the pie from the retail industry, how
right.
do you see that impacting the real world people and their value in this world when more and more digital influencers and virtual influencers are being thrown into the system, even the dead ones?
Yeah, I know. The whole world just seems like it's dispersing more and more. Some companies get more. Some companies are becoming more valuable. I mean, more powerful. And, you talked about the haves and the have-nots, but at the same time, a lot of the tools today are giving people access to more opportunities. So, in other words, like going back to the low code, no code tools, it makes it so that people that are not as skilled technically can bring stuff to life for lower cost and without the need of the technical talent. And, so an individual person can all of a sudden get a lot further, easier, faster, with different skill sets. At the same time, the big companies that take advantage of that have an opportunity to work with smaller like tiger teams and still be more competitive that way too. But I think the thing is, in this day and age, you can have competition coming from anywhere. It can be from that individual person, any kind of influencer, any kind of entrepreneur. It could also come from a big company that just is able to move quickly and has a good idea and lets that company emerge or that idea emerge, within its ecosystem. So I think the world today, it's just become a lot more unpredictable and and more competitive because of that. And the thing is, it's not all about a big marketing budget either, or being able to get the right real estate like it was in the old days. It's more about, do you have an idea that resonates? And that can come from one person or two or, big companies. So I don't know if that answered your question, Sailja, but it's,
we are all basically in blue ocean. I think one of the entrepreneurs recently talked about that, all of us are in a blue ocean. We'll see how the world goes. So some fun questions. So if you had to make your own digital avatar, a virtual influencer, convert yourself into an AI avatar, what would that look like?
If I...
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I'd be one oriented more toward exercise, and that's what I feel like I'm missing all the time now. I'm not able to, but it would be one that's more, even though it's digital, I'd be more physically active. I don't know, like it'd be more than just sitting here.
Okay, so then the virtual VR, you'll have the VR suit and you'll do VR exercise.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so do you use, so are there any top like 3 favorite tools, go-to tools for you, like social media? Do you have favorites?
I don't. I'm so busy working all the time. I go to Facebook a little bit for my family, but that's actually fairly rarely. I never go to Twitter anymore, it seems. I watch YouTube, like for this kind of thing. I learn. I guess that's what I do a lot of. I watch videos to learn a lot, and so let's say YouTube or Vimeo or
Okay.
Yeah,
And are you a avid listener of podcasts, like the whole
I
audio
have
revolution?
tons of podcasts. I'm in the way top tier of Audible. Like I'm way beyond any of the badges they give. I
Okay.
probably listen to at least a book a week, maybe more.
Okay.
I
So,
yeah.
so, so I think so. Given that we are all actively creating a dystopia for ourselves as mankind,
Yeah.
okay, we are actively moving towards that. 10 years from now, what do you think, or 20 years from now, what is humanity going to work towards? Because everything will be done by robots. What do you think 20 years from now? What are we going to be there for? A very philosophical question.
Yeah, and I don't want to be political or anything like that, but I just hope, working in the future like I do and like what you're asking about, I have a lot of optimism, but I have a lot of fear too. And just I live in Colorado and I can see the mountains from my home, but half the days this summer, or 2/3 of the days this summer, and most of last summer, we can't see the mountains because guess what? All the smoke is covering them from coming from California and the fires in our state. And then you look at yeah, I just hope the world uses technology to make the world better for our kids, fixes the climate, fixes a lot of the social injustices, fixes, because I think technology can help on these fronts. But what we don't want are the bad guys to take advantage of the technologies. And,
Absolutely.
we were just looking at some tech the other day out of Taiwan that helps, you can use it to improve nuclear weapons. And it's just scary to see these things. It's these chips that will, allow you to simulate certain things, certain events. And I don't know, like, I just hope like a lot of good people get really involved in technology to help us maintain the outputs of the technology.
So I think we need to figure out an AI which will basically constantly talk about good stuff. So on
That's
that
right.
very
Yeah.
yes, and on
Hacking actually scares me quite a bit. There's a great book called Sandworm that talks about a lot of the hacking that's occurred, recently, and it's just kind of scary. I mean, it's kind of the armies of the future.
yes,
And
and I do hope that there will be more white, like shining white and what do you call, like knight in shining armors in the
yes,
digital ages, to help us not go into the dark ages, because digital dark ages will be a thing if we are all not very careful. And on that very very
yeah.
light note, I didn't want to make it this morbid, but thank you so much, John. I hope you had a good time, and I definitely learned a lot, and I definitely hope to follow all your next gen innovations. They're very, very exciting. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Shelja.
If you wish to have a conversation with us, then email us at retailcorner@proxima360.com or visit our website at theretailcorner.proxima360.com. Thank you so much for tuning in. Stay safe and see you next time.